Influencer marketing or influencer relations. I'm Anne Miles from Suits and Sneakers, and this episode we have back Trevor Young. He's a content marketing and communications specialist, also known as PR Warrior, and we'll be talking about influencer strategies for B2B and B2C, and how do you become your own influencer, and where does influencer strategy live? Thanks so much for coming today, Trevor.
Oh, thank you, Anne. It's good to be invited back.
Oh, you've always helped create really good stories. And I think the last interview we did was like a top performer for quite a while. So everyone should look at that one too.
Good body of work you got going there. I think it was one of the early ones. So really great to see how the show's growing.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it's been private for a while, so I'm lucky it's done as well as it has. And now I'm moving it all to YouTube. So I'm expecting it to go a bit more crazy now. So watch this space.
Excellent.
Okay, so I'm going to talk to you today about influencers because I'm feeling, me, the marketing police, always wanting people to do with integrity and to lift the lid on some of the the myths and I guess smoke and mirrors that's out there. And it seems to me that there's a little bit of smoke and mirrors around the whole influencer thing at the moment. Is that like a new thing?
Look, I think it just continues. I think as let's call it influencer marketing, and then we'll break it down in a tick about what that means. But as a catch-all, the whole world of influencers just continues to grow because the media love doing stories on influencers and usually a certain type of influencer, TikTok or Instagram. But that gets attention, and then, brands jump on and they know that their ad dollar is, it's harder to make your ads work for you today. That people's attentions are splintered. They're not listening to ads as much, etc. So they've got all of those underlying issues. And then they see, oh, we've got these influencers. They've got 100,000, 200,000 followers, 50,000 followers. Let's get them to create content for us. Or in some cases, when brands do it really wrong, let's give them the content to put up on their social media site.
Yeah, maybe that's where the discussion shortly too, like you talked about numbers. I think people do get obsessed about numbers. Yeah. Before that though, because I think a lot of brands definitely seem a bit confused between a spokesperson and an influencer. Like, what do you see the main difference between them?
And when we talk brands too, I mean, brands are like, it could be a B2B brand, it could be a major global consumer client, and could be a small business, anywhere in between. So we've got to wear different hats on that. But I guess it's all come out of, years ago everyone had the big celebrities, and we all know that Michael Jordan was incredibly successful, and some of these celebrity endorsements continue to be used today and can be successful as well. Some have used them as spokespeople for the brand. I think they'd use the word ambassador more than spokesperson. I think the CEO should be a spokesperson, and any other nominated people within a company. But I think the word we're probably looking for is ambassadors, and that's where it probably all started. Having had a PR background, I've always kind of worked with people who were sponsored by brands, and then trying to get them out there into the media and at events and etc. So to leverage the power of that. And I guess the move, and we know with celebrity endorsements things can go wrong as well. Things can go wrong with any influencer if they get into trouble and you're very heavily connected with them, then there's a dotted line back to the brand. But I think that's very much where we are. I don't see influencers today terribly much as spokespeople, but more ambassadors, and they talk about the brand that they love. Hopefully they love it, and they've usually probably got their key messages, hopefully, but they don't sort of speak for the company per se. But then again, if anyone's listening to or reading or watching, on a video, an influencer, and they're talking about the brand, they don't know the difference between, oh, they are an official spokesperson. Oh, they're not, I don't think it works that way. It's very blend.
Yeah.
It's very much a blend, I think. Yeah.
It is a bit of a blend, isn't it? I think that's partly why the legislation's recently had to be scrutinised. And before we go talk about that, so do you think there's a difference in how a B2B brand and a B2C brand might use an influencer?
Yeah, definitely. I think when you look at the sales cycle and the types of products, they're very different. So if you look at B2B, often what's being sold is a lot more expensive. You're still dealing, your customers are still people, but it's a business expense often. The sales cycle can be quite long and convoluted. Again, is it software? Is it professional services? That side of things. And then the other part of it is that, the research will tell us in B2B that, people who are making those decisions within an organization to purchase another brand, not to purchase a brand, but to purchase a product or a service, they do their homework well before they're ever going to talk to you. I've seen figures anywhere between 70 and 85% of their homework's done before they even contact you, say if you're providing services. And so with that in mind, you look at them, they're going to go and do their homework and who influences their decisions. And, is it a podcast that they heard you on, or, someone that they like who's big in the industry who talks about you. So I think the difference between B2B and B2C is probably more your Instagram and your Facebook and your TikTok and, smaller products, very lifestyle driven often. It's a lot of it would be, emotion and not necessarily a long gestation period in terms of life cycle. Whereas B2B, it's a bit more circumspect. There's probably a bit of gravitas. Credibility is everything. Trust, that side of things, only because what you're spending, people in companies don't want to, they're risk averse. They don't want to, buy a service or a software platform or something, and it doesn't do the job for them. So they really do their homework, and influencers can play a major role in that, and not necessarily paid as well. In fact, I think you find there's less paid influencers in B2B than there would be in B2C. The paid and the whole, Instagram influencer trend and everything you read about is very B2C, but that doesn't mean that it does, influence isn't out there in B2B world.
Yeah, that's a super interesting point, because it sounds like it's an untapped area. Huge. Actually. And I know that that you talk also about the difference between influencer relations and influencer marketing. Could you elaborate on what you think the difference is there?
Yeah, I can. And think of it as a Venn diagram, and there's a joining of the dots, and the two can blend a bit. But my main thing is, again, coming from a PR and communications background, we've been dealing with influencers for decades, so it's not new territory. The influencers probably tended to be journalists and stuff, but still people with an audience and who had genuine influence. So it's always called media relations, because it's about building relationships with people. So PR, being relationships driven, is always about today looking at who influences your intended audience for your brand or your client's brand. Who are they, and have they got a platform, and should we get closer to them in a genuine way? It's about building relationships. I always say, it's about building relationships with the people who matter the most to the success of your business, your cause, or your issue, and influencers that you can identify could play a role in that. Influencer marketing, to me, the way I see it, it's become a bit more transactional. So rather than relationship driven, it's more transactional. Here's 5, we'll call them influencers, even though they might not have influence, but they've all got 10,000 followers each on Instagram, and one sole person on TikTok who's got 100,000, and we're going to give them money to create content about our brand, and we'll give them guidelines, and we'll set it that it all goes out across 2 days, and bang, 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 bang. And so that's very transactional. They're actually being used as a media channel in one respect, but then it comes down to, do they actually like your brand? Are they already a customer of that brand? You know, do they genuinely love your brand, and will that come out? So there's a lot of you know, areas there that marketers need to be aware of. So that's the two together. So on one hand, I've shown the two extras there, but they can come together. And when they come together, maybe there's an influencer who's absolutely perfect for you. You know that they use your brand anyway, so they've got an affinity. They love it. They want to get closer to you. You talk to them, you build a relationship. And part of that relationship is, you know, we'll invite you to some events, give you some behind the scenes stuff. Depends if you've got something to give them. And if you want to take that further, maybe there's some, you know, you put them on the payroll and you pay them a fee to create content for you over the course of the year. So that to me is a really nice blend, because it's still, there's a paid, there's a bit of an expectation there. You can control it a little bit, but there's respect, rapport, relationship as well. So that's when I think influencer marketing really works. But the heart of it is the relationship and the respect between both parties. And that takes time. You can't just buy that off the rack.
Yeah, that's a good nuance. And you're making me think of something that happened to me personally. So, you know, my personal mission out in the world is to take stereotypes out of the world. So that's kind of a little side project that, you know, my activism. And I've noticed I've been really contacted a lot by brands who want to tap into that story. But the funny thing is, like on Instagram, I've only just started and hardly got any people following at all. But I've had people wanting to send me product, and I know what they're, at the end, I don't have the audience in that channel. You know, really for me, it's LinkedIn. But what they're doing, I've noticed, is they're actually wanting content at no cost. So I think that's a funny nuance as well. That's a little bit in between.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the product thing is a genuine one. I mean, I know that you know, if there's a big you know, fashion event, for example, they'll have goodie bags there, and even having product placement in goodie bags going out to people attending a high-end elite fashion event, that's a form of influencer marketing. You're giving products, and you're hoping that you know, people who are in the audience who are potentially influential might be using your product and talk about it. So that's been going on for years. That's, you know, that's a really guerrilla form of influencer marketing. Can work, bit hit and miss. Should you do it? Maybe. Should you not do it? Who knows? And I think the product there, I mentioned before about whether you've got events and things like that. A lot of, I like the influencers who, you know, they've got their own media channel. Maybe they're a blogger, a podcaster, a live streamer, you know, a YouTuber, all of that. Hopefully they've got good social as well. They've got a mix of channels. You know, but maybe then you've got an event coming up that's relevant for them. It could be you know, you've got tickets to a conference, an industry conference. This is probably going more into the B2B side. You know, bring them along for the conference. Show them behind the scenes. Give them access to the CEO. Again, if you've got something of value, a blogger or you know, a lot in the marketing game think that bloggers are like journalists, and they're not. You know, they're not going to put up your press release. It's not like that. What they want is experiences. And if you can give them behind the scenes access to your brand, you've got a new product coming out, you know, you want to show people, you know, give them access to new products before they hit the market, and say, go for it. You know, it's the same as getting people who've got a platform, giving them tickets to a movie before the movie's out. You know, that's giving them access. You're not buying them. You're giving them something of value. They like movies, bang. It's a wonderful thing. And that's probably the influencer relations side, where you've got something of value. They want access, and you can help each other. You know, it's win-win situation. And I've seen that many times. It works at a really grassroots level. That doesn't mean it can't be taken into the next echelon. And you can also put a bit of paid in, and, you know, someone might be quite a big podcaster in a business in a particular industry, you want to reach them, and you do with that. Maybe you've got some really good talent and experts that can be on their podcast, and maybe you like the way they create content, and the podcaster is an expert, so maybe you do a collab with them on a white paper, for example, and you'd have to start paying for that sort of thing, whereas you wouldn't pay for the interview on the podcast. So again, no hard and fast rules, but it's about having an awareness of and respect for the influencer or the content creator, whatever you want to call them.
So there's a few things there that would work in the B2B spaces that you've talked about. Are there good tips that you think that businesses... I've noticed myself, I'm going to jump to this, that a lot of B2B businesses want to get a lot of bang for their buck, right? So they don't have a huge budget often, and the rule's supposed to be 6 or 7% of your overall revenue is meant to be spent into marketing on a B2B, but the numbers come out that they're actually only spending 2% or something like that.
Wow.
So that means we need to be smart about some of these strategies. Are there other ideas that you could recommend for businesses, to use influencer relations or marketing without like humongous budgets?
Yeah, again, it'll differ from industries, but a lot of big companies have event. Well, now hopefully they're running events, or they got research papers. So a good one is if you do an annual research paper, find out, are there any bloggers in your space or people who have got sizable and they seem to be very active on LinkedIn, very engaged LinkedIn profiles potentially. Again, are they potential conduits to the audience that you're after? And you give them prior access to the research. So given that I've been blogging for a very long time and in the marketing social media content space, and I've over the journey been on the receiving end of that, and it's terrific because I get access 4 or 5 days out to some really meaty research documents, and they're research documents that from people I really respect. They reach out, am I interested in it? Absolutely. It's embargoed. Yep, got that. And that means I can sit there and write the article, have it ready to go. So that then when it's released, boom, I'm already done. I'm out at the same time, or if not before anyone else. And it's not like being an exclusive, although having an exclusive is even good if you're a really big influencer. But being part of that, in a circle, and getting access to good information like that is really good. Often companies will bring out experts for various things. They might bring out the global CEO. If we're talking a massive company, you might get access to interview that person on your podcast, for example. Other ones might be, you sponsor the Grand Prix, where you've got tickets, take them to the Grand Prix and look after them, say thanks for sharing our content. That's life. That's building connection, rapport, respect on both sides. And the influencer, let's call them the influencer or the blogger or the podcaster or whatever, chances are they'll do the right thing because they want that information. They want access to executives. It works for them. So it's really looking at the assets you've got. It's being aware of the people who have influence, and we haven't talked sort of size of followings. And I know that there's a lot of conjecture around what is an influencer. Are they a nano influencer, micro influencer, a macro influencer? I think there's a mega influencer in there somewhere. I think the opportunity is at the lower end. So influencer marketing that we talk about and we hear, and it's in the papers, and everyone's got 100,000, 200,000, 250,000 followers on Instagram or 1 million views on TikTok. That's good. That's all good. But that's only one part of the industry. The micro influencers and the nano, which are even smaller and more niche again, that's where the action can be, the opportunities can be for smaller businesses, potentially for more niche, larger companies that service various niches, and certainly in B2B as well. So the challenge then is identifying the right people and then, working with them And you know what it's like. It's the law of reciprocity, giving people something and not expecting anything in return necessarily. So it works. It can work well, but there's a little bit more grunt work down there. Whereas at the top end, you've got so many different tools that can identify all of these people. And then it's a machine. It's a machine. There's a lot of money involved. There's talent. When there's talent agencies, that there's a lot there. So that industry's there. It's real. It's fair income. And to a large degree, it's pretty good. It's got there's a dark underbelly there as well. And marketers just need to be aware of not just blindly splashing cash for someone who might look great but really hasn't got influence and is maybe not all their followers are real.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think you were talking another time about there is precedence of someone with a huge amount of following and it didn't work.
Yeah, I can't remember the name. It's kind of like folklore now. It's probably become mythological proportions. But it was someone who's a young woman who's got a monstrous platform, a monstrous following on Instagram, and she created her own T-shirt line, and virtually no one bought them. So, yes, big following, but not influential enough to get her followers to actually buy some T-shirts that she's created. So, and that's life. That happens. Yet there's the story. It's a great book actually. I recommend people read it if they're really interested. It's called Winfluence by Jason Falls. I love Jason. He's been in the social media and influence marketing space for a very long time. But he talks about a guy called what's his name? Martin Bamford, I think it is. Martin Bamford, and he's a financial planner. I'm just trying to think of the name of his company, Informed Choices, I think. He's in the UK, he's British. And he's got a podcast and he's been blogging. So they're his two main platforms. I don't think his followings on social are massive. I had a quick look before. I think he's got about 12,000 on Twitter. And anyway, UBS, which is a very big global bank, they were doing some research to try and find out who's influential within the high net worth individual space in Britain. And I believe they used a tool called Analytica, one of many, many tools. And this Martin Bamford's name kept coming up. And this is a story that Jason tells. And so they pitched their head. So this is a UBS. I keep saying USB, UBS, big global bank. And they've pitched their head of wealth management to Martin for his podcast. And they've done they've done the interview, and this bloke's appearance, it apparently led to 4 times more leads. I think 4 times more leads than their big reports that they normally do. And a lot of banks and B2B and financial services, they do reports and get email addresses and get leads that way. But apparently they 4 times the leads. And, when you're talking about a lead for a high net worth individual and maybe a lifetime customer, they're quite valuable. So, has Martin got something out of it? Well, he's got the head of a global bank as a guest on his podcast. That's fantastic. That's what podcasters want. If I was a podcaster and someone said, I got the head of marketing of, the World Bank, well, would I be interested? Of course I would be. Maybe. What's your point of view? But you can see where that works. And that's just a simple, but, quite strategic. They've really done their homework. They've identified. I don't know if there's much relationship building in between, but clearly pitched someone of note for this person, and that's a respectful thing to do, and it's kind of worked for them. So that's that's a one-off, but that doesn't mean that sort of thing can't be done over a period of time. Maybe they sponsor his podcast if it's that good. That you don't know where these things lead. These open doors, but that's the type of thing that I'm interested in. I like it from, I help people become sort of build their thought leader brand. So I like that when I see that sort of thing happen. But I've also over the journey, advised brands on, we want to reach this audience who influences these audiences. And let's not care much about massive numbers per se, but who has the ability to influence that audience. And I'm pretty channel agnostic on that.
I think that's a really interesting word there, though, that thought leader. So your, mission in the world is to help people become their own thought leader. And thank you, I've done some of your training, and I felt like it's, helped me, one, get confident enough to, to be of value to the community and get my head out there. So that strategy is another thing. Like you talked there about a CEO, but that's of a big company. To become an influencer in your own little niche, what did you call it? A nano niche?
Well, a nano influencer is someone that's, I was doing some homework just beforehand because I know there's lots of different numbers on what is a nano influencer. You only have to Google it and you'll find lots of different numbers. It's kind of like between 1 and 5,000. Some say it's under 10,000 followers. Now, I know we're going back to numbers, but that's usually just the starting point.
Yep.
And then a micro influencer is a little bit bigger. And then you get into the big, the megas and the macros. So I think the micro, depending on the industry, maybe in B2B, a micro is probably a little bit smaller in following, but maybe potentially more influential with those people. Whereas in consumer land, or lifestyle, it could be, you might have to have a bigger following to be able to cut through.
And there's no right number, is there?
Numbers play a story. Of course you do. How many podcast downloads have you got? All of this sort of stuff. But really, you might have 10,000 podcast downloads, but no one they listen, but they don't necessarily take action. Or you might have a small, really tightly engaged audience around a really particular niche, and you're very well known in that niche, and it could be 500, and that's enough. It's never one thing. I think that's the problem with marketers. They're trying to hit it out of the park every single time. And I don't believe that. I think it's about, these are foundational activities you do as a day-to-day thing over the course. And if you're, and this is where the PR side comes in, because if you're in an industry and you want to deal with the local the trade journal that services your industry, and you need to have a presence in that, well, you're always going to be close to those journos or those editors and continue to build relationships with them over time. Maybe invite them to events, maybe you go to their events, maybe you share their content, they share your, all of that sort of stuff. And it's kind of like a win-win. So that's a plank of your overarching PR and communications.
So if you had to, put money in one basket or the other, if you had to choose, where would you begin content? Do you know what I mean by that? Is it a marketing job? Is it a
content itself? Look, Look, I'm, and again, it's going to differ for every company, and whether it's B2B, B2C, whatever. I'm a believer, and probably I'm biased because of where I've come from, and we've done content all our lives, but I'm a believer that content starts with PR and communications, and you build that. You're building the brand and its trust and credibility in the marketplace through storytelling, through influencer relations, all of that sort of stuff. And then the more marketing content sits on top of that, and the ads sit on top of that, and everything else. A lot of marketers, like if I do a pyramid, and towards the top is the advertising, and then owned, earned, and social media fits underneath. Now, a lot of influencer relations is earned media. You're earning the right for someone to write about you, talk about you, share you, all of that sort of stuff. The influencer marketing, where you're paying money, is kind of like you're renting someone else's audience. The only difference is that rather than you give them the creative, they're doing the creative for you. And that's where there's a lot of trust. Now, we've all heard horror stories, and I won't name any names, but there's been some big brands, and I've heard it from the bloggers, who have got quite big audiences, and they were fighting with the marketers of a particular brand, big brand that we all know. And they wanted to control, the brand wanted to control the copy. Yeah. And the blogger, who has a very strong, unique voice in the marketplace, and I'm not going to do that. That's not respectful for my audience. That's not right. And it'll sink like a stone. So she ended up walking away for some pretty big coin, actually. because of that. And the good influencers, the good bloggers, tweeters, whoever, the influencers, they're content creators first and foremost. The good ones will say, no, this is not right for me, I'm walking away. That's a really good sign that if they're willing to walk away from something, that's good, because that means they know their audience, they've got respect for their audience, and they don't want to be just taking cash just to put out a message. So that's something there. But in terms of content marketing, going back to that original question, I digressed. Yeah, I like building the base through PR and communications. That's what they do. That's what they've always done. Build those stories, build those thought leader brands, get the experts out there from the organization, work with the influencers, all of that, and work hand in hand with marketing, because there might be some content then that you really, really, really need, that it's really demand gen type content, potentially end of funnel. I mean, if you want to get into funnels, I'm not a massive believer in them, but maybe the top of funnel is the PR and comms, and then as it gets down, it gets more sharper edged with marketing messages, maybe that. But the two parties have to work together, otherwise it ain't going to work. So I've seen it work both ways. I've seen marketers do great content. I've seen PR people do bad content, and vice versa. But I know which way I would go if I was running a big content program within a big organization.
Yeah, that's talking of the funnel thing. I've seen some coaching programs around like effective funnels, and also how to keep your media costs right down using the strategy you just talked about. So I'll just inject that because I think it was a really great insight. So basically they use the PR content and social, like you said, the bottom of the pyramid, to get the views and to kind of pre-qualify their audience. So they filter, get a very niched audience. And then after, I think it's the fifth transaction or fifth kind of filtering, then there's a marketing click here, buy now. Yeah. And they only have to pay for that click through in their paid media work, because that's, they only play for that click at the end. So what they're doing is basically pre-qualifying, so everyone who clicks is more likely to buy. So I feel like that's a good.
That's 100%. Well, it's as simple as you're warming up your audience, you're building trust, all of that sort of stuff. Look, I can go back to the original ad, the lemon, was it the Volkswagen ad? Many years ago, like back in the 50s, maybe. Yeah. I don't know. I wasn't there then, but but it was, regarded as the best ad, and it was a really good full page ad and about Volkswagen and their ads in America. And, they said how effective it was and all of that. But what they've neglected to say is that the media publicity in the run up to it for years and years and years really built Volkswagen. So when the ad hit, it really worked. And that goes true today. You keep building that base again and again, all of these content assets, 365 days of the year. You build relationships with the people who matter the most to the success of your business, influencers, media. You create the content, you build your own audience, you connect with that audience. You find the influencers within that audience. You get your experts out there, all of that sort of stuff. Social media plays a part in that. You may spend a little bit of money to amplify that content and to help build your list. And then it's the same with it, and that's working. And then you can market to that list hopefully in a respectful way. So if you looked at an email list, a lot of people say, I'm in email marketing and everything's a pitch. Whereas you get the others who are probably more, well, I just want to build my audience and then I'll pitch, like it's every now and then. So if you stripped it back to that, the day-to-day email communication with your audience of giving value and interesting stories and stuff, again, different strokes for different folks, of course, but as a general rule, that's probably the PR comms department. And then when you're starting to pitch and you've got campaign work and those spikes of campaign, because what happens in between the campaigns, that's when the marketers focus on those campaigns, because that's what they're really good at doing. But if the two work together, then that's really good. But if they don't work together, well, then, one builds the audience and the other smashes them over the head with messages, you lose the audience. So look, I'm a purist in that regard. I've always believed this, and it's now we've got the tools to do what we really want to be doing. And it's the opportunity out there is exciting. And, influencers are just one part of it, but it's all content. Content starts everything. It's the starting point. Starts conversations lead to relationships can lead to to conversions and to new leads. So that's my theory anyway. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm happy to be corrected, but and again, it's what's right for you and your brand. And a retailer in a lifestyle area is going to be different than a SaaS company in B2B. So I try to, I probably have to generalize a little bit, but by and large, that's the way I see it working. When I see it working, it works really, really well. And it's probably the most cost effective. Otherwise, you spend a lot of money advertising to people who don't want to hear from you. And that doesn't help anyone.
No. And speaking of that, bashing them over the head thing, do you have a preferable percentage of a sort of give and take, if you call it that? So, PR and content that's useful is give, and, like click now and buy us is a kind of take or ask.
Yeah, no, there's not. I mean, I think when in social media, even back in the old days of social media, and it's probably still true today, it's kind of like an 80-20 rule. So on social media, if you're going to put out, 10 pieces, 2 are asking, and 8 is the earning the right to ask. I think with content, it never hurts to, you can tell us, you can tell when people have got a campaign lined up and they've got some emails that go out or some content that goes up on LinkedIn or some ads will appear, but they're stories that move you towards, that's content that's really well thought out, and it moves you towards the result that they want you to do or the conversion that they want they're after. But often that is in a campaign mode, so that when you see that coming, all of that will be probably reasonably commercial, which is fine if you've been adding value prior to that. But if you just land that on, then you're showing no respect, I think, for the audience. But to build the audience in the first place, you must have done something right anyway. I think that though, that every now and then it's 100%. I talk to my clients about this. I mean, I look at the 4 types of content: the utility content. I think we've discussed this before: useful and helpful. The leadership content, which is, not necessarily useful and helpful, could be thought provoking, could be inspiring. You've got the more human content, which is behind the scenes and the stories of partners and all of that sort of stuff. And then the promotional, well, I'd call it promotional content, which is fine to do. We've got this webinar coming up, or, we've got a new sale on, or we've just launched this new product. 100% fine. 100% fine. It's because you've earned the right to do that. And so there's no sort of right or wrong. I mean, I know when I've, launched, I had a sort of an online coaching program or group coaching program, I got a little promotional towards the end of it because I did, but I also tried to make sure that I had some, some just good content in between it as well. So it's just having an awareness, I think, and just being mindful that, I'm over promoting. It's funny. I talk to clients now and say, we don't want to promote anything. I said, well, just a little call to action. How about you DM me or something like that? And sometimes I have to talk people into it. I've never had to talk people into doing that before. Yeah, usually I have to talk them out of it. Hey, you're overkilling that.
Yeah.
It's good. It's interesting. It's going, they're swinging the other way.
Yeah. And having a little bit more of a commercial aspect to it. Yeah, couldn't hurt. I could probably do a little more of that myself, which is funny. So I've got one more question for you, unless there's any other things that you go, I've got a brainwave I've got to talk about. So you've talked a lot about, the term influencer relations. What makes a good partnership in the whole scheme of things?
Yeah, good question. Relevance, definitely relevance. I think your brand needs to be relevant to what the influencer is about, and the influencer needs to be talking about relevant things. A degree of relevance helps. I guess in lifestyle, there's that, I read a recent case study where Foods, which bring meals into your home, like you make them, but they give you all the ingredients. They got something like 80 plus influencers or Instagrammers across health and fitness and food. So that makes sense because it's about eating healthily and stuff like that. So it's relevant for both. And so you'll see that bit of crossover in the sort of that lifestyle side of things. But as a general rule, people need to be, quite relevant or be able to take, they might operate in this area, write on this or create content on this space, and you're over here, but there is a direct link. If I go down this path, I can make it relevant for my audience. So relevance for both is very important. I think respect is really important. Respect it's mutual respect. If you haven't got mutual respect, it's not going to work. Whether that's paid or not, mutual respect is really important. And building that kind of that relationship off the back of respect. And I think it's what can I give you? How can I help you as a brand? How can I help you to the influencer to reach your audience, give you more content, give you access to some stuff? What can I do to help you? And it might be as simple as you might not have any of that stuff, but as a brand or as the CEO of a startup, what you could be promoting other people's content to your audiences. Could be that simple because you might not have anything to give, but you can still be part of their community. You can still subscribe to their content. You can still hat tip them. And over a period of time, you might, there might be an opportunity to collaborate. So you're leaving the door open for that. And it's and done in a genuine way, not just in a, I can't think of the word.
Transactional, maybe.
I think when you're genuine about all of these things, it's going to work a lot better. And we know that's hard to scale, but some people do it really well and some people don't. And at a higher level, that's why you've got talent agencies. That's why you've got some amazing tools that keep popping up that can do everything and most things. I've never found one tool can do everything that you ever want.
I was just going to ask you, is there one tool that does everything?
One I'm hearing about is Tagger. People keep talking about Tagger, but I don't use them, so I don't really know. But there is a tool that everyone probably knows, and if you're in the B2B space, it's a matter of being part of it and in it. It's a really good tool and it's cheap. It's called LinkedIn, and LinkedIn can be quite good as well. So there's lots of different tools and lots of different social listening tools. Sometimes that's a way to do it as well. So I don't want to get too much into tools because there's a lot there, and I think you have to be pretty heavy into the space. The enterprise ones are quite, they're like Rolls Royces, and it's not just about identifying the influencers, but then being able to map the process underneath of approaching them and just because you might have multiple people involved in those campaigns, and so you just need one area where everyone can follow what's going on. Because what about if the main person leaves, they take all the knowledge with them? You need it all within the tool. So most of those big guys have got all these tools that they spend a lot of money on, and they do a lot of the back end work.
So just on the training that you do and helping, thought leaders, like I'm wondering, is that a good place that a company might be able to send some key people who've got a good point of view? Like you talked about earlier that one of the simplest things for a B2B space is to present their research papers to the world or create one or whatever. So is that the kind of thing that you could show them? How can people get involved with you to become their own thought leader?
Well, usually I work with individuals because they're the thought leaders. They could be the experts. They could be the leaders within an organization, whether it's a small one or large. You're still people with information to get out there. And I sort of help them become their own media channel and hopefully inspire them to do it a little bit more. And we fight with each other. I haven't got time to do this, but if we do it smart, and this is where you got to aim at, and who's your audience and what are you trying to achieve? So I coach people individually like that. I'm also about to launch a program called the Credible Authority Academy, and that will have different training within it, and that is all about positioning your brand for your personal brand or your professional personal brand for the reputation economy. But I do coach with individuals as well, and ongoing, and we build programs And I'm more of an accountability and support and angel on their shoulder, but also I can kick you if I have to do a little bit of accountability. So I found that that's working really, really well. So anyone can connect with me on LinkedIn, or I love connecting with people on LinkedIn.
I'll make sure the links are there as well. And if I can add to it, I think one of the other things that you do brilliantly that a lot of people get really stuck on is they don't even know what to talk about, like what content do they do, and do they do 100,000 different topics? I think you really have a particularly good insight into fewer sort of buckets that things sit and make it all tie in, and how does it deliver on your brand message. I feel like that is a really valuable thing that a lot of people forget to do.
I've been doing thanks for that. I've been doing a lot of that over the journey, but even the last 2 days I've been going deep in with a couple of really top experts in their company in a challenger brand, and they're so passionate and they're so knowledgeable, and I work with people that's the credible authority. I help them become credible authorities. I think the people I want to work with are genuinely good at what they do. They've been in the trenches. They've got the information. They're really credible, but they're the ones so often the least likely to put themselves out there. And so part of I think what I do is to encourage them to do it, and to just show them how they can do it in a really focused way, and not to try and do everything, but to get the building blocks done, and then you can expand from there. Because I think, there's so many things we can say, I can do this and I can do that and I can do that. We've all been there.
Definitely. And I think the major thing that we've talked about before, I think I've been on your podcast somewhere about it, was when I first went out on LinkedIn, I had to totally get over myself and just, put my face out there when, I suppose that imposter syndrome is the thing. Why would I do that? And it's scary. And anyway, in the end, here's me. I just like cut loose now. But I think that's really valuable. I seriously cut loose now. It's funny, but I think you really help people have the confidence to know how to come out and be strategic and not look like an idiot. So I think that's valuable. Was there any other last minute tip that we've not covered, or you want to?
I know we've covered a fair bit. I think if we could just bring it back to the influencer side, and we got in contact back on this because I wrote an article about it the other day, but on LinkedIn. But I just think it's the same with anything. There's not necessarily right or wrong. Everyone seems to think this is the way you have to do something, and there's truisms, and there's probably a few well-honed rules in most areas. But what I've found is that what's right for you and your brand. But I really do take that organic, philosophical approach, build the base of with communications, with content, build those relationships, and work the marketing in with it, rather than probably the other way around. That's just probably my only message. And part of that is the, influencer marketing versus relations. Try and build relationships with people. And yes, if you're going to do it with scale, you might have to do the paid, and you might have to do the marketplaces and use the tools and get out there, but always have an eye for, okay, we're going wide, but maybe we have to then pull it, what worked, learn what worked, and then start pulling it back and working with people more ongoing, and work with them rather than more one-offs. Because I think influencers marketing works much better over a period of time, as does communications, as does marketing. So that's just me, and people will have a different view, but that's probably my key message for today.
No, awesome, and thank you so much. I feel like there's something there for people who are just starting to dabble, but also I think there's some really good tips for the bigger brands who maybe trying to optimize, and to get that little nuance is going to tip it over.
Yeah, you can always improve. It doesn't matter if you're doing everything perfect now, whether it's content, whatever. You can always do better and improve and get out of your own head, and look broader. And then even if you've got a plan, you can always bring it back, but at least you've looked at the bigger picture.
No, it's perfect. Thank you so much. I'm indebted to you. You've always bringing a good story, and I'll make sure I put all those links in the bottom of the page for everyone to find. Thanks,
Thank you,
Trevor.
Anne. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you for watching. Suits and Sneakers is all about top talent in media marketing and advertising, and watching this content is keeping you top talent. Don't forget to subscribe and push the bell so that you get notified when the latest episodes come out.